the rest of the anatomy. Have we gone over the integumentary system? I think we did a long time ago. Do we need a refresher? That's your skin, hair, and nails. It's page 41, section 5. So the big things to think about are, actually, we should just read it again. Natalie, would you like to read the, so it's integument. Could you read that section?
Integument means covering. The system that covers our bodies includes our skin, our most sensitive organ, glands, nails, and breast tissue. Our skin's main functions include 1. Protecting from the outside world. 2. Helping our immune system keep out invaders. 3. Detection of stimuli through touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. 4. Assistance in regulating body temperature. And 5. Excretion of sweat and salts to help us maintain homeostasis.
Thank you. Kara, will you read why I teach using the power of touch?
Sure. We can't live without our sense of touch. The neurotransmitters responsible for sense of well-being decrease when touch is withheld and can be fatal. Arousals. Touch once consent is given.
You can keep going.
Can give touch once consent is given. It can help students relax, get into asana deeper, feel supported and connected, and experience the asana on a deeper plane. It increases oxytocin and reduces stress hormones like cortisol.
Did you finish that section? Okay. Erin?
What to avoid?
Obviously.
Don't touch your student's stomach, chest, or genitals.
Yes. So it doesn't need, I didn't think it needed to be said, but let's just have it in here. Stomach is an incredibly intimate area, yeah? And chest feels like boobs and armpit, no matter how, like here is where we can go. Anything lower, people don't expect, so we have to think of the agreement that they make when they walk into a yoga studio, unless you've said, hey, by the way, we're focusing on releasing this and you're an LMT and that's okay, and they've signed off that they're okay with you touching here, we're just gonna let it go. They don't make that agreement when they come in to have their stomach touched. Like that's even when you're massaging somebody, that's a conversation. That is, hey, this is why I think I should touch your stomach. This is what I'm gonna do. This is the benefit. Do you want it? Otherwise, not a big deal. Like even that level is still, people get very uncomfortable. So especially in triangle, that's when people do it the most. They'll like grab onto the rib cage, but it's stomach, right? And then they'll hold on here and it's chest. It's like, that's not, we don't encourage that twist.
How do you feel about the consent cards?
I think it's not private, and so it feels a little, it's like a good intention not quite followed through all the right way, in my opinion. Right. Because if I didn't want to be touched today, and it's because I'm dealing with something traumatic, I wouldn't be comfortable saying no with everyone else seeing it. So anybody that has a trigger, anybody that's going through therapy for sexual abuse, anybody that's recently had any sort of trauma when it comes to being touched, I don't know how they would feel about it, so in my mind, I don't like it.
Because it's public.
Because it's public. If it was in child's pose, everybody close your eyes. Now reach your hand. It's on top right now, says yes. If you don't want an adjustment, flip it over to say no. And then as soon as you see everybody, then say, okay, let's turn your cards back over to yes, put them under your mat, let's go. Then I would be fine with it because it would be super private.
I just heard the argument that it's hard to remember in a big class.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Even if you have 100 people, it's pretty easy to remember the ones that don't want to.
That's kind of the argument I make.
And if it's too much, okay, I'm not giving adjustments today. Totally easy. Or you pick a couple people that you know, and you just give a few adjustments, and that's it. Because in 100 people, you're not going to be able to touch everybody anyway.
Yeah, and then it also lets people who are not sure about adjustments
What
know.
they are, yeah.
I don't know how to frame this, but how do you ask, or do you just let this go of people wanting hands-on adjustments? You know, some people are neutral. Some people, like with the paragraph we just read, it really changes the class. It helps you relax, also in a deeper connection connection,
Yeah.
yeah, do you inquire just outside of class knowing that student and like through talking you realize hands-on adjustments are important? Or is there a nice question of
Yeah.
being like, if you're looking for hands-on adjustments today, raise your hand?
There is, and it definitely depends on class size. Often if it's less than 20 people, the first half pigeon, if I know that we have time, I'll say, hey, if you want an adjustment in half pigeon, will you just raise your hand and I'll come around and get to you. That said, they might all raise their hand, in which case you gotta hurry.
But no, you have the whole class. Well, okay, you would then probably be like.
I would do it.
all
I
do
mean, if you're that's an agreement you're making, saying if you want to be touched, raise your hand, and then if they all do it, you go. So I would say like honestly, like less than 10, you'd be fine.
Yeah,
Because even 10 though,
yeah, you have to really
that's
get it.
that's a lot.
I went to a class where she didn't do the adjustments until the end, till you were in Shavasana,
Mm-hmm.
and she just said, if you don't want adjustment, put your hand on your belly, and she came over and just did some just some light, like almost massage on your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was lovely, but it was also a very small class.
That's nice.
So that, with the 6 people in the room.
Yeah.
Then it gives that one connection at the end of class, which I thought was nice, but.
So with people that love adjustments, I definitely say find out after class. Like, hey, next time, do you want to be adjusted in any particular pose? And then you can gauge their response. But the appropriate way to ask for consent is everybody's eyes are closed at the beginning of class. If you don't want adjustments, that's okay. Adjustments are when I come around and I either help you get into the pose in a safe way or I can massage your shoulders just like a little bit. So if you don't want that, totally not a big deal. Lift up your hand and I'll pay attention and make sure to keep you in your space. So just frame it in a neutral way. If it's a lot of new people, I'll explain what adjustments are. And I might do that with their eyes open. Say, hey, so an adjustment is, hey, Kara, do you mind if I adjust you? It's like this. So if she had her shoulders up, I might just do this. And that's kind of what adjustments are. So if you don't want them, not a big deal. Let's close our eyes. If that's you, raise your hand. So just slow down and explain it. And then if you really want to say, okay, if you really want adjustments, lift up both hands. That would be a fun way to say it and then you can see the people that are like, because sometimes like you haven't been hugged for a week.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, girl wants a hug. And adjustments are a really good way to get that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about adjusting people that you are attracted to, since that kind of came up earlier.
Yeah.
There will be people in your class that you may feel attracted to. That is normal human nature. If you notice that when they walk in, that's your chance to shut that down. Just during class. As a teacher and a student, we gotta pause. The agreement is that we're not sexualizing our students when they've paid us for a service. And it is not a difficult distinction to make. I have none of you I'm worried are not gonna be able to do it. If it's your partner, then be mindful of your adjustments, but by all means, I mean, if that's what you guys, sexualize them as much as you want, but I would be mindful that when you bring that energy into the room, everyone's gonna be like, what's going on with her? She's like powerful today in a weird way. Like they will notice.
Yeah,
It's like that movie where he's like, boom. What was that, couples retreat where he does the adjustments?
Oh, yes. So I have if I find that there's somebody who is attractive in class, I will treat them exactly the way I treat other people. If for whatever reason I'm not, like if it's a partner of mine, I will not touch them. There is that touch that I separate it from. So if you're like, dang, he or she is attractive, we don't adjust him in half pigeon. we just let that go. Because they will feel it even if you've shut it down, they might not. But that also, and we'll talk about this in ethics, that it can be reversed. People walk in and you see them stare at you and you're like, oh no,
exactly.
What do I do? Why are they sexualizing me? But when you're in a teacher position, it's pretty easy to notice it and you can modify their behavior based off of setting expectations that are strict. So it's just boundaries. If somebody is all eyeballing me, which does happen sometime, I will not make eye contact with them, and I also not go near them.
Yeah.
After class, if it's bad, I'll say, hey, I don't feel comfortable with that gaze, so if you want to come to my class, I'm going to need you to focus here. I don't like this. It makes me feel really gross. What's your name? And then we'll talk about it, and they'll say, oh, I'm so sorry, and I'll say, that's fine. I don't want to be sexualized. This is my job.
Yeah.
And then I just super strict. I've only had to say that like once.
Totally. It's fair.
Or sometimes people before class will be like, yeah, can you make sure you dress like here? And I'll say, no, I can't. But my groin's like really tight,
Gross.
and I've had that before, and I say, no, that is outside of my scope of practice. That's anytime something's uncomfortable, that's outside of my scope of practice. Sometimes people will moan when you give them adjustments. Normal. People, if you're rubbing their shoulders, they might go, "Oh." But if it's like sex noise, just stop. Have a pretty strict sex noise rule
Yeah.
in the yoga studio. I firmly believe that it should not be sexualized. That's my personal opinion. I separate it a lot.
Yeah. No.
Because of the power dynamic, it's really easy to sexualize somebody who's telling you what to do and bossing you around, and no. I do not want to be that. That is not what you're paying me for. I am not in that kind of relationship with you. My relationship is I'm going to teach you some things.
You'd be way higher paid if you were.
Yeah, it's going to be triple the cost. Yeah. So yeah, definitely don't touch stomach, chest, genitals, but be mindful of your touch if there's any sort of attraction. And you might not know until you're in the bubble, and then they like kind of look at you and you're like, I shouldn't have done this. And you have every right to walk over to somebody, and it might feel awkward. But so say I walk over to Natalie and she starts like eyeballing me, and like I would just be like, and going over here.
Yeah.
Like, you just move. You just go on out. You are not expected to follow through on any adjustment if it makes you uncomfortable.
Cool. I'm glad we're diving into this. I mean,
Yeah.
It's intuitive, but yeah.
It is, but it's nice to talk about it because I think sexuality is so ingrained in a lot of things, and we don't like to talk about it a lot, but when you're in control of a group of people, you need to understand the power dynamics, and we will definitely talk about that in the coming weeks in our ethics conversation.
So is yoga similar to nursing, where you're going to get some weird comments from men or whatever? I mean, because it didn't happen to me that often in nursing, but when it does, it's pretty clear.
I think that depends on the type of people that come to the demographic of the studio, maybe. But also it depends on, there's a lot of things. It's complicated, right? What people choose to say things. I, in my experience, haven't had that happen to me. And I think it's because I am so unapproachable when it comes to anything like that. Like I've never been asked out, which teachers get that all the time. Like I shut down any sort of anything other than professionalism. So I think my professional demeanor turns most people away. That side of somebody, it doesn't matter what their demeanor is. If somebody wants to tell me something, they're going to. So I think maybe I haven't had that same experience, but I'm sure it's possible. I've more often had women,
Oh, wow.
not men.
I didn't have very, I think maybe I don't even think it's gone off one hand, maybe just like 3 people in my whole career. And
That's
that's
good.
in an enclosed environment, and their wives are there. I mean, like, it's weird.
You might hear
Like,
things
nursing jokes.
on occasion.
Yeah.
You have anytime you're uncomfortable, you end a session.
Mm-hmm.
You just say, and class is done today. Even if it's a group class, I don't care. If somebody is harassing you in class, you stop it, you move on. Even if it was 10 minutes into this class and somebody said something to me or touched me or made me feel uncomfortable, I would put everybody in child's pose and ask that person to leave. And if he wouldn't, I would close the entire class and say, hey, Shelly, I had to end class today. This creeper came in and he wouldn't stop eyeballing me, and he made me incredibly uncomfortable, and he wouldn't leave when I asked him to. Obviously, eyeballing me isn't something that I would kick somebody out of class for. I'm talking about something a little higher.
Yeah, a little higher.
But, I mean, if eyeballing makes you uncomfortable enough that you can't teach anymore, yeah, girl, I will support you 100% and just ending class. It's funny, we talk about these things, and I hope, never have to deal with them, ever, because I've never had to kick somebody out of class for that. I've had to fire a private client, but only once. We'll talk about that. Okay, would you like to continue reading?
Do not surprise them. Don't touch them from behind if they can't see or hear you.
And this especially goes when we're talking about people that are going through therapy. Anybody who's been abused, we don't know their triggers. Usually, if they're going through that portion of therapy, they'll say, don't touch me. However, there is a level where they've moved past that, where it's part of their therapy, they are being touched. But don't go from behind. There's something so unsettling about just sneaking up on somebody. I will say I've surprised 2 people in my career. One, we were on a beach in Shavasana, and he couldn't hear me when 2 was the other night in class. Somebody was in child's pose, and she was in her own head so much that no matter how loud I was, even though the music wasn't very loud, she jumped. which puts people immediately over here. So you probably won't do that very often, but it's gonna happen, and that's when I say sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you, and then I didn't give her the adjustment because obviously.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't cuddle your students. Everyone has a bubble. It's probably not the same as yours.
So, and when I say cuddling, I'm specifically referring to, does anybody feel like they want to get into a triangle pose? I need somebody to get into it. So I was training a man, and this is not a gender specific thing, but I will say that men have parts that we don't.
Men have what?
Ben, you left me.
Oh.
They have testicles.
Oh,
Okay, so when we're close, even though I'm very close to her and I'm holding on here, I don't have any testicles pressing into her. Men do, okay? When I was teaching a man, he was so close to me, I could you can come out of it.
Okay.
It was like he was spooning me in triangle pose. And I was like, hey, so did you know that we can feel that?
Teacher, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
a teacher.
Exactly.
And he just didn't even, he was like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I saw you were really close to her. And I was like, yeah, but there's room. There is room. I'm never touching somebody with anything besides my hands or my feet.
Yeah. Wait, did his genitals were touching you?
Yes.
He should have felt it then.
I know.
What the fuck? Gross.
That's disgusting.
I mean,
he couldn't know.
But that's just an unawareness that's hilarious.
I know, but I had to like shut it down a lot, and so now in teacher training, I always just bring that up. I was like, hey, so you're cuddling me, and it's really fun, and I know we're really close, and I know you're super gay, it's not a big deal, but don't cuddle me. Like, that makes me very uncomfortable, and that will make somebody leave.
Yeah.
But just no part of your feet, because you can go right behind somebody in triangle and have your
Support
feet
their feet.
near them, or warrior two, without none of this. Just don't. It's too much. That said, in Bikram trainings, they lay all over each other. Like in child's pose, they'll like lay on you or sit on
I've
you.
seen this.
Does anybody want to get into child's pose?
Sure.
So there's two ways that you could. Oh, can you turn around, please? So there's two ways that you could get this adjustment in child's pose, and I'm not going to do it. One is facing this way, right? This seems appropriate. I can face here. I can sit. Can I sit?
I'm looking in the mirror, yeah.
Oh, lovely. So I sit,
That's just not something
and then I lean forward.
I mean, if it's you, I like it.
I mean, that's like,
Oh.
seems like very intimate anyway.
Oh, but you know what's worse?
Yeah.
So we don't do it this way. Like that's called teabagging.
Yeah.
Right? That's why we do it this way.
I guess maybe in a private environment or something, like, I just wouldn't feel comfortable sitting on with students.
Dude,
Yeah.
family.
I get it.
I mean, I was working on my husband this morning. I was doing that because his hips were really high and he needed a massage, but
Well,
like,
and
he's
again,
my husband.
that our hands give adjustments.
Yeah.
Even feet. A lot of people are uncomfortable with feet. Like a
Yeah.
lot more than hands. If somebody said, yeah, I want an adjustment, we know that we can use our hands anywhere that's not this part of their body, and they're probably okay with it. But when it comes to feet, even that is and I hesitate to touch people's feet, especially with my feet,
Yes.
unless I know them. Or if they're falling all over the place, I'm like, girl, I don't care if you have athlete's foot. I got you. But there's a level of hands are always okay. Everything else, including sitting on somebody or laying on somebody, is let's come up with a really good reason why you're going to do it and make sure that they're comfortable with it before you do it. Okay. Will you continue after? Don't cuddle your students.
Yeah, don't give too much attention or too little attention to any particular student.
Read, especially if you're attracted to them. Don't ignore them because they will feel it. Don't only adjust them because they will feel it. Especially new students. New students, if you adjust them more than once, they're going to be like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Not all of them, but a good portion of them feel singled out. So just know that it might have taken them 50 years to come to a class. Let's not scare them off by giving them 5 adjustments. Unless when they do it, they're like, thank you. Then yeah, give them another one because they love it. Because sometimes people will be like, thank you. Usually they're this. And that's like the symbol for thank you. Yeah, and if you're ignoring somebody, make sure you address it. Unless it's like actually I wouldn't in general. If somebody's making you uncomfortable and you don't feel safe, don't address it. But like the person who was eyeballing me, I addressed it after because I wanted him to know this is why I was not making eye contact, this is why it was unacceptable, and this is why you can't come back again unless you change your behavior. However, if you're not comfortable with that, it's totally fine. I don't want you to feel like you have to approach somebody who's made you uncomfortable. Does that make sense? Because you're more important than them. All right, Rina.
How to safely touch your students. To protect ourselves and our students from pathogens, the bacteria or virus that cause disease, like lice, athlete's foot, or scabies, it is important that we uphold SAUCHA standards. So, wash your hands before and after class. Refrain from touching your face while you teach. Sanitize between touching students' skin or hair. Don't share their sweat and the skin themselves. When you touch your students, avoid touching open wounds and rashes.
Especially with feet and it's dark, I would avoid it altogether unless you can see it because you can pick up something.
Yeah, exactly. If you give adjustments with your feet, ensure your feet are clean and clear.
Thank you. So we walk around barefoot a lot. I have never had any issue. And I've walked around at YMCAs and outside and at gyms, at LA Fitness, here, places that have never been sanitized, places that are super clean. I've never had any issue. However, it's really easy to pick things up, especially in a place like this, which is warm and humid, because that's where bacteria are happy. So when we're giving adjustments between students, if you touch their skin or hair, sanitize. There's always sanitizer somewhere nearby. If you touch their clothes, it's not as important.
Okay.
However, it's always okay to sanitize between people.
How much do you sanitize?
I don't usually touch skin, so not very often. Mostly because I hate hand sanitizer. But if I feel sweat on my hands, like if after I adjust I feel any wetness, I'll sanitize. But not very often. I also, the more I massage, the less I seem to adjust.
Okay.
And with this particular season of cold and flu, I almost completely hold back on adjustments until they're, which I feel bad about a little bit, but at the same time, I'd rather not give Sue the cold that Mary had, just because people come to yoga anyway.
How do hot yoga teachers deal with adjustments? Do they just sanitize all the time, or is it
No,
just
they
like-
never do ever.
Exactly.
They've
No,
never
sanitize
learned
all
any
the
of this
time.
section.
So then it's just
Somebody here?
so sweaty, and you don't even want to touch them.
Someone here?
It's, and then they just, they're not somewhere else.
Okay. What were you saying?
Like in hot yoga, when everyone's so sweaty that anytime you touch someone, your hand's gonna get damp.
Yeah.
Do people just not?
Yes, they just don't sanitize.
I think it, yeah.
Sanitizing is I would venture to say, any teacher training I've ever heard of has never talked about cleanliness between adjustments, ever. This is not a thing that whenever I tell people like, oh yeah, we learn about that in teacher training, they're like, what? I never thought about that. I'm like, have you ever had shingles before? It is very easy to transmit.
Yeah.
It is incredibly painful. So I think because I've worked with the population, lower class population, specifically of the aging lower class population, I've seen the importance of cleanliness between people, but typically it's not a thing that people do or learn about. So I don't mean to scare you, but I think that if you knew that, so we had a scabies outbreak in the last teacher training. And this is middle and upper class women that from like this surrounding area. One person got scabies. She said, I had it once when I was a kid. I recognized it right away. I went to the doctor. They told me I had it. I had it on my leg. The gym shut down operations for a day. They cleaned everything. Teacher training, we all wore socks from then on out. And she wasn't giving adjustments or anything.
It's still spread, you say?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it just started.
Okay. It wasn't
Didn't
an
spread.
outbreak. Okay.
I don't know why I
Well,
said
guess that could
outbreak.
call one person having an outbreak.
Let's call it a one-person outbreak, but that was more like I said the wrong thing. She had an outbreak. Yeah, she had because she's had it before.
You didn't have a.
Extrapolated it to be like an outbreak in teacher training.
Well, it was
It was
dramatic.
Yeah.
But if she hadn't said something, and if we hadn't sanitized between people, we easily could have given it to each other because it was on her foot, upper ankle. So it is important, and especially if you're going to be working with populations where that might be of a higher concern. But even people here are going to get scabies, are going to get shingles. It's not just because it's a thing that older people get with immune function, doesn't mean that we all couldn't get it tomorrow.
Right.
So I don't want to worry you, but also it's important.
I'm just thinking about the number of classes that you've been to where you've gotten adjustments
Yeah.
And you haven't consented to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's,
And the foot adjustment is like a thing.
Right.
so if you're gonna do that, just put a towel over their feet and then you can do it and it's amazing, right? Have you ever had that adjustment before? It's where you're laying on your belly and somebody puts their feet on your feet and kind of kitty paws back and forth. It could feel really good if you don't have arthritis.
Yeah, I just think of the number, like, I used to go to a studio in Virginia, and that was like their, like. you
The
know,
righteous part of me gets so angry when I hear about someone saying, I didn't say it was okay to touch me.
No.
I think it's like the righteous, like feminist part of me that's
Yeah.
like, excuse me. I feel like I'm unnecessarily angry because I'm angry in general of all the people that think it's okay to touch women without consent. So I think I might be like a little hot button issue on
Yeah,
this, but I
yeah.
think consent's
And
important.
it was just really interesting how they wouldn't do it to everybody in class. And it was almost like, it got to a point where I was like obsessed with figuring out how they figured out who they were gonna do it to. Like, was it a reward because they thought you were exerting yourself? This was a Bikram style studio. So I was like, oh, is it a reward? Why, what do I look like, do they look like their feet are in pain? Like, I was like, it became like an obsession of mine, and then I was like, and then once it was bestowed upon you, you were like, okay, what did I, like, and then I was like, wait, she just touched me with bare feet that were walking all around, and I don't want this anymore. And then it was like this weird thing, and no consent was ever given for any of that stuff.
So consent's important.
Yeah.
Can't stress that enough, especially with underserved populations. Nope, that's not true, because the prevalence of sexual abuse across the board is high. We don't know who has been abused, and that trigger, we don't know what's going on. So consent is like step one. Close your eyes. If you don't want adjustments, let me know. Adjustments are when I put my hands on you to help you be safer or to enjoy the pose a little bit more, and it's fine if you don't want them. Sometimes I say, I would love to give adjustments today, and I always say, don't say love in my head, but it comes out, I would love to give, but what I mean is, I would give you an adjustment unless you don't want it. Raise your hand if you don't want it. And that's every class you ever teach, unless you're not giving adjustments, in which case, yeah. But if you say that and you don't give adjustments, people will be like, why didn't I get an adjustment? Don't even say it if you're not gonna do it.
We emailed and you said that you probably shouldn't touch people unless you have insurance.
Yes.
And maybe we'll talk about this more later, but
We
I was
will.
just curious if you work at a studio like this, are you covered by their insurance? Or does each individual yoga instructor have their own insurance?
Each has their own.
Oh, interesting.
The business owner should have the general liability as well for anybody that walks in, and the waiver releases the studio and the teachers.
Okay.
However, so as here, I don't have people sign my waiver because it's covered under her. However, I do have my own liability insurance, and anywhere beside here, any classes that I teach, I have them sign the waiver. And then you hold it forever in a fire-safe proof, or electronically in a password-protected system. And we will talk about that, but yeah, definitely. That's all we're gonna talk about for the systems.